Hi, I'm Victor. I'm creating this video to document something that I learned last week when I create a React application, a new one. Instead, to use the regular library like we used to use when we start building a new one, like Redux and Redux Saga or Thumb. So instead to use Redux, I'm just gonna take the concept of Redux and then I'm gonna create my own Redux using Context API and hooks. Moving to the hooks API reference documentation on the website, we will be able to see several methods or hooks. One of the more frequently used is useState, useEffect, useContext. But also there's another one called useReducer. With useReducer, we're going to be able to perform the same behavior that we are used to use on Redux. After dispatch some actions, we're going to be able to catch these actions using the switch statement, and then we're going to return our new state depending of our particular actions. This is the concept of Redux. From the UI, we dispatch an action. For example, if we click a button, this action is going to be catched by the reducer. Depending on the type of the actions, we're going to be able to use the switch statement. So after that, we change our store, we change our state, the same thing, and this change is going to be reflected directly to our view. That's that we want. So we're going to use the same concept, but we're not going to use additional library. We're going to use React, pure React. Let's get started. So the first thing that I'm gonna do now, I'm going to create a new project from scratch, and I'm create this repository called Webpack boilerplate. It's just like all the configuration that I need to start a new project. That's why I did it. Instead, to clone the repository, I'm just gonna get a copy from the master, and that way I'm gonna be able to create a new repository with this tutorial. So I'm in this tutorial right now. Let me just go in Context API folder. So there's nothing, just the documentation that I add. I'm just gonna copy core. Then, as you can see, we already have Webpack boiler. Just let me just change the name to something more easy. App. So now we have app. In app, as you can see, we have a public folder, src, and in src just we have a simple initial component, and that's it. So let's go ahead and install that dependency that I needed to make it works. Okay, it's already installed. npm run dev. It's already in the script on my package JSON file. Okay, our application apparently successfully launched. So it's in the port localhost 9000. Perfect. We have our initial application. So it's this. Nothing fancy, just we're gonna make it work. The second thing that we're gonna do, we're gonna create simple input field with button. I'm just going to modify this quickly. Okay, so we have, it's doing nothing right now. So the second thing that what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use context. To create a context in the same file, I'm going to create a new file called main context. Main context, of course, we need to import React. And this is just an initial parameter that we don't need it, actually. This initial parameter, it's just when we are writing some test cases, those initial parameters, because at empty, we're going to be able to keep using our context without any additional modification. So we're going to export. So that way we are going to be able to use main context provider. and also main contacts consumer. We already have our contact, so next thing, we're gonna go back to this file, but next thing that we're gonna do is now we're gonna create our another component. This component is gonna wrap our application, and we're gonna call app provider. We're gonna import React. We're gonna import our contacts. Then we're going to return our main contacts provider. We can pass some name, like display name equal main contacts. And then of course we need to pass some initial values or some values to our provider. To make sure like that thing is working, we're gonna just create a new object called, and I'm gonna pass the initial value to this value. We're gonna close it. We are going to pass our child components using our props. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna wrap our main file, our main app, this app. This is my initial entry point. And we're just going to, so everything should work as the same like it was working, but we're gonna use the React dev tool to see if our React DOM has been rendered. So as you can see, everything is wrapped using app provider. We have our contacts provider, main contacts, with initial value name vector. Now, instead to use this child, I want to be able to use consumer to access to my values, my provider. We're just gonna refactor that. We are going to create new folder, create one folder we can call components. And inside components, we can add another folder called child. It's gonna be our child components and child.js. This is our components. And we have a child, then we are going to factor it child, but also we need to import child from. Something that I like to do all the time is we can create an index.js import child from the same directory, and we can export. That way we don't need to duplicate it, just inside the child we have an index and it's gonna grab this one. Perfect. Our application looks the same, so everything has changed. If we look we can see that we have now child component. So now I'm gonna try to render the value that we have in our provider. Currently we just have a name, so I want to render inside the child just to make sure like. And here we can wrap this component in our consumer, but also there is another hooks that is more interesting. It's called useContacts. Then we need to import the main context, main, and we are able now, let me just change this. Instead, we need to use, and we need to return this guy. And now we're gonna be able to create a new variable, main contacts equal, use the hook, and we pass the main contact. Now we have these hooks, so now we can access to the value of this one, like name. Let me print it out, and as you can see, vector is printed. Now I want to change the name of my provider every time I type something here. So I need to add a method to my provider to be able to change this, this state. Okay, now we're gonna be able to see both at the same time. So we are going to move to our app provider where we have declared our initial value. So what we can do is we can use a state. First of all, let's use a state hooks, and we can pass our initial value. Perfect. Initial value perhaps can be vector, and then we can pass this value to this state to our initial object. It should be the same as name as name. If we check our application, let's see, everything is the same. So now it's using the state. Let me change it. You will be able to see like it's using the state correctly. And now we're gonna write a new method to change the naming state. So we get the method, but we need to call this method inside of the child components. So what we can do now is we can, because this is an object, we can pass change name object into our initial value. And if we look at inside of the tree, our context provider, we're going to be able to see our method to change the name and our state. So it means like we're going to be able to execute the method from here. So we're gonna can copy an input change. We're just gonna grab the value of the input, and we're gonna access to main context our method change name, and then we're gonna pass target value. So this method is gonna be triggered every time the user types something. So let me reload this, and now let me just get rid of this. We don't need it. And this part here, anyway. Let me just reload and testing. So everything is working as expected. So we are calling our method, then passing. We're gonna calling this change name that is inside of the app provider change name. It's setting a new state, and this state is updated in our initial value. But the initial value object is always updating into the provider. In the consumer, when we are consuming this contacts here, so we're going to be able to also render our name value. That was just like a simple demonstration about how contacts and combining with hooks are working together. It's really fast, it's working fine, perfect, and I haven't used any additional library or dependencies. The next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna introduce another hooks called useReducer. I'm gonna introduce here, instead to use the set state or use state hooks, I'm gonna use useReducer. As you may know, reducer is just like a simple method combining with the switch statement that you are gonna able to select any state and change the original state of your application. So let's just refactor this a little bit. You're gonna be able to see how actual works. So we're gonna create a new context. It's gonna return to me the state of my application, and dispatch. Then useReducer and the reducer, just to make sure like we're going to import from some places, and initial value. What is that initial value? This initial value should be the same of this one. Perhaps we can use the same one just to demonstrate that thing should work. I'm just going to comment this out and I'm going to create my reducer. I'm going to create a reducer here and an action. And we're going to have a switch cases, couple of cases like case, and this set new name is going to return the original state, an object. We're going to express the state. It's just if we might have more properties in our big state, but right now we just have only one, that this state is just the name, but also we have this method I don't want to override or something. So we're gonna get the actions and we're gonna also get the actions payload. Sorry, name, that is my object, my property. We're gonna assign, we're gonna pass something in our payload that it should be the name that we want to set. Perfect. So we have our reducer. We are passing our reducer in useReducer, and then I have a typo here. Const. Let me just fix it. Okay, perfect. And this state should be, I'm gonna express instead the whole state, just to make sure like everything is fine. Perfect. It's not gonna work because we haven't add any dispatch to execute the reducer that we want to change. So it's gonna, if you're familiar with Redux, you know, like first we dispatch an actions, then it's going through the reducer change and take the payload from our actions, change the state, and then we update our UI. It's the same concept that we're doing here. Now we're going to put this thing here. We're gonna create our object, initial object. Let me just initialize again, name vector. The method, this method, I'm gonna add it at the top and I'm gonna add here. So this initial value is gonna be here in our initial state, and then we won't gonna use the initial value of our objects. We're gonna use the state that gonna be returning from our reducer. So that way we're gonna see if we have our initial state properly. So all right, that's perfect. We have our initial state and we have our method, and if you can see, it's coming directly from the useReducer. This is this particular state. Now we need to dispatch some actions to be able to make our reducer change our state. So let's just remove our previous implementation. I'm going to create an actions. It's gonna be called change name. This object, like we are using in Redux, it's conformed by the type, name of the type, and payload. So this is just how we are used to define actions. So we're gonna keep our, so the action that I'm gonna do for change the name is gonna be called set new name. It's gonna be the same when after dispatch this action, after call that action, then it's gonna get through the reducer, it's gonna match with that case, and then it's gonna spread my previous state, and the name is gonna change it by my payload, and the payload is going to come from this. So this payload is gonna be set by the name, and everything looks fine. We need to use the dispatch method. So this dispatch is gonna be able to do dispatch our action with our payload new name. We need to grab this to dispatch that actions from our child components. Now we need to dispatch, we need to create a method to pass through our provider, and then gonna be able to call our actions. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna transform, we're gonna get the method here that we had previously before. We're gonna remove it from our initial state. Let's create here. That thing won't gonna work because we are not using secName anymore. We just remove it. And then we just gonna use the dispatch method, and we're gonna pass through our change name action, and inside of the dispatch name we're gonna pass our name. I don't know if that is kind of confusing, but change name, when I call this method, I'm gonna pass something inside, then I'm gonna use the dispatch coming from useReducer, and we're gonna dispatch this this action type. Okay, it's fine. But this method, it's not inside of my state. What should I do? So what we're gonna do now is we're going to modify the state here. I'm gonna create something called my const my initial state equal object. We're gonna spread the original state, and then we're gonna append our change name method. We're gonna generate a new object, and this object is we're gonna pass through our provider. And there we go. Let's see if we are going to our application again, our provider, we're gonna be able to see change name method, perfect, and name. I made a mistake here. Instead to open a curly bracelet, I need to return an object. That's the way that we can return an object and remove this. This is gonna be a new object here. So let me just reload it, and Santos, perfect. What it's doing now, it's using the reducer object. For example, our reducer is in charge to match with the actions that we are dispatching, the same concept that we are using in Redux. For example, if I change something here, this never gonna match. The actions never gonna match with our reducer. So that's why this that state never get updated, because it's returning every single time the previous state and previous state. So that's perfect. Now we have this, and we can move on to make a little bit of refactor, because I don't think you're gonna create a new application and have this messy code with everything in place. We're gonna go to apply our reducer, our actions, and perhaps API in our component. So we can create the concept of container inside our folder, let's create a new folder called container. It's gonna be the container of my child components. I'm gonna create a file called Reducer, another file called API. Well, I'm not gonna use API now, but just you to have an idea. Later we're gonna introduce some API call. We're gonna call something performance, performance.js. Perfect. So we are going to refactor this. We're gonna use this reducer. I'm gonna put inside this reducer, and we're gonna create main performances equal. We're gonna create this method, and this method is just going to have inside our on change name with it. Let's call on change name. It's gonna receive a name, and then it's gonna dispatch the name. So let me just remove this one. Oh, I don't want to remove now, sorry. But where is coming from dispatch? That's why I need this method, because I want to pass down the dispatch from this. But that won't gonna work. Let me just at the end, I'm going just to return an object with this method. We were able to have multiple method here with a multiple names of those method. Okay, let me just clean this up. Export default main performance. Oh yes, I forgot in container actions. Actions, we are going to grab these actions that we have, because we're gonna have multiple action. I'm pretty sure about it. We're gonna create these actions, but because we're gonna have multiple, let me just wrap it up into actions. Oh, just gonna create a type to also reuse it. We're gonna create an object called types. These objects are gonna have chain name type, and then we're gonna set new name. Let me just call set new name to be more consistent. And then I'm gonna instead to hardcore this, we're gonna use types and then the name of this type that we're using in this object. It's because perhaps we have another actions called clear name. Another one just can be if we're gonna use some list, add name, and so on. But for now, we just only have one. It's gonna be actions, but actually also I'm going to export to be able to access to these types. Made a typo here. Gonna be able to access to this type from our reducer. So if we're going to reducer, instead to hard code and to make the application more maintainable, because if someone changes this name here, that name here never gonna match. So we're going to import, and it's coming from the type, from the actions. Let's use types. So we just refactor it. So, but now we need to go to our main. We're going to remove the change named actions from here. We're going to remove the reducer. Should be shall. Oh, that's my mistake. Container should be inside of the child, because I just want all those methods for child. So now we can container and then reducer. Now import actions. Now we don't have this new method. It's gonna coming from our performance files. Oops. Performances. Remember, performances have all the method that we needed to perform. So we don't have that action yet. So we need to. I made a mistake here. I import the actions here, but it's not here. The action is gonna be triggered from. It's gonna return these actions and chain name action. And we're gonna pass through the payload. It's gonna be the name. All right. This is coming through directly from the actions. So perfect. Let me see. And something from change name actions. It's not defined. So it should be inside this action. Let's get back this act. Oh, yes. Is a method. We don't need a method. We just need to pass all the name as an object. Let's just change it out. We're gonna pass this guy like this. Gonna remove this, and then we're gonna be able to add multiple actions in this object. So now chain name it's not defined. Change name. It's set like it's not defined. Let's get back to our provider.js, and in change method, this is the problem that we have here. Let me remove it. We don't need it anymore. On our app provider, we just need to import our child performance. We're gonna spread the result of chat performance, but also we're gonna pass the dispatch. So what it does now is we are calling this method, the result of this method, we're gonna spread into my initial state. So performance, this one is gonna return this object with a multiple method, and this method is gonna be populated into my initial state. So right now, let me just reload it. Okay, nothing's happened. It's because we changed apparently the name of the method. Let me just double check. It's called unchanged name. Oh, it's because I changed the name. So if we're going to our child component, it's not changed name, it's unchanged name. So let me save it. Perfect. So we just did the refactor. Everything looks good so far, but there's a couple we're not done yet, because imagine that case that we need a bunch of components, that we have a bunch of components with multiple containers inside with actions, API, performance, and others. So we need to unify all those reducers to be able to just use one big state. So I'm gonna create another video just explain how can we do this using the same context of React. And in another video also we're gonna add some API call, some middleware to be able to perform the same thing that we did here with Context API. Okay, let's recap what we did previously. This is our entry point, so we're just passing an app. This app contains our provider for our contacts. So this provider is this file that is handling my provider, also my reducer, integrate my reducer in one, and my states. And perfect. We don't need this state anymore. We are using reducer. And we have a component called child components. these child components accessing to our context, main context. Main context is just like the creation of main context, create context with some initial values and its port to be able to use provider and consumer through our application. To introduce some API calls, let me just, we're gonna make another more changes, but also we're gonna use perhaps JSON placeholder, which is a free API that we can make some requests and we can populate some data. So what we're gonna do now is, this is a post. Let's go to main provider, initial object. We're gonna add some called post. It's gonna be an empty object, and post now is empty. Let's just add one value inside this one. This is how our posts look. And if we're going to our application, let's just check again our provider, contacts, provider, initial value, post. We have one post, titled, ID, and others. We're going to our child components and we're going to access to the post. So we're going to be able to, let's just create or anything else. So now it's spread it out. It's already here. Let me just add some. Okay, list of 12, we have one, but it's already hard coded. What we need to do now is to fetch those posts from the API. So what we need to do is we're going to use in our container, we're going to use performance. Remember that we are dispatching the result of name here. We're going to create another live fetch get post. Then it's going to generate a new promise. Let me get post. We're going to put it here. Let's check our provider. Perfect. We already have our function immediately. So we're going to call this guy from the child components. We're going to use the another hooks use effect just to be able to use the component did mount, the same thing, a component did mount, but use effect. Okay, perfect. Then we're gonna get the main context that get post. We're gonna call this method. We don't need to pass any parameter. And remember, for component did mount, we need to pass empty array at the end to perform the same. So now we have the post. Let me just see the console log. Perfect. You can see after I save it, it's component get mount, and then it's performing my request call. Okay, instead to use then, I'm going to use asynchronous. It's the same thing, just gonna generate a new promise, but instead to here. So it's gonna get the same result. So let's just let me reload this, clean it up, and let me save it out again. So we are getting the same all the post that we have here. But now we have to get all the result and we need to pass to our provider. So because the provider will only have one post hard-coded. So let me just clean this up. We don't need to hard-code anything. Let me just to do a good practice, just now we need to get that result and dispatch another action. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the post and we're gonna dispatch. We're gonna call something like success. Get post success, and we're gonna pass the to our action. So, but this guy it's not created, so we need to create it first. Create it. So let's move to our actions. So let me open it up. Going to create a new action. It's gonna be this one. Now we're gonna be able to perform these actions. But also now we can perform these actions. We need to move to our reducer to be able to handle this payload and update our state. We're gonna go case type, and it's gonna return a new. So we don't have anything yet. Let me just move here. The child, we're gonna add a new button. We got a new button. Let me see how looks my context provider. It looks empty, empty post, get post, dispatch, and you see how it's get populated using the API. And it's requesting successfully. If you go to the network, you're gonna be able to see that. But perhaps we wanna, filter one post so we can pass something and we can actually perform an actions here. Post number. We should be able to get one. Cool. Let me just remove this one. Then we are able to just fetch all just one. So we can use also actually another field to populate anyone that we want. So this is perfect. We are working with the fashion, but we also can refactor. For example, the response of API. I don't like that way to mix it up. So instead, we can perform these actions. We can use the API and this say like get post API. Await. So it's gonna await, then it's gonna return a new promise. And we're gonna import this guy from performance. Equal get API call, and perhaps we can pass the number. Post number, post number, and there we go. We are able to populate all our values. And perfect. Now let's move on to how to create how to combine multiple reducers for different. In this session, we're gonna create a new component. This component is gonna be comments. So we're going to fetch to an API, but now first we're gonna split it, we're gonna separate it, we're gonna create a new folder called a comment. Comments, we're gonna have another for container, the same thing that we have previously. We have an API.js file, we have a reducer file, we have a performance file, and actions. And of course, the name of our components, comment. There we go. And now we are going to import Now we are able to access the comment directly. Now we have the comment. We're gonna populate. Let me populate at the beginning. Gonna add it at the beginning, comments. So just let me. I'm gonna close it up. All the old ones, you know. Okay, comments. Just yeah, add a little bit of style. We're gonna add the border. Now we need to add this comments field. We're gonna open our ad provider. We have comments object inside of the object, and just let me perfect. We have ID, ID post, name, email, body. Let me. And now we're gonna create our hooks called. All right, first comment. Let's just print it. We have a title, name, sorry. A name should be ID, blah, 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 something weird. Perfect, we are accessing to the content. But the question is, we need to fetch that data, do the same thing that we did before. But the issue that we have right now is we will have multiple reducer. So that's why we need to figure it out how we are going to be able to handle all those the big object, our big store. So let's just I'm just gonna copy this to make it faster. Then we're gonna create our API request. Same thing, API request, but the endpoint of this one is gonna be other. This one, comments. Let's move on to performance. Gonna reuse everything here as well. Performance, but our API call is called difference. We should post get, and here we're gonna get comments, and let's just remove everything here. Set comments equal get comments API. We don't need to pass anything now. We just wait for this, for the result. Then we're gonna have, after we have the result, we need to dispatch a new actions. But we already have a new actions. It's comments sys, and we're gonna pass the whole comments. So perfect. Get comments. I'm gonna call this get comments. We don't need this anymore. And actually, maybe more cleaner if I can just do this. Let me just refactor a little bit. It's gonna return this object. Let me remove this one. Perfect. So we're gonna return in this method. Let's call this one If I keep performance, it's gonna be more performance. Perfect. It's looking good. Now the reducer one. This is the more important to update our result that we have. So we're gonna move to reducer. Let's copy and paste it again. But in this case, we're gonna have only one action. It's gonna be type succeed, common succeeds. Common succeeds, we're gonna comment. Oh, we're just going to. This is gonna be interesting here because we don't have this object yet, but let's see what's happened. Okay, we are done. But the problem is we need to remember if we're going back to, let me just clean this up. I don't need the hard-coded one anymore. So if you can see here, we have a reducer, but this reducer is just the main one coming from the child one. So we can call child reducer. Child reducer, and we can pass the child reducer here. But if we add a button, let's just try to add a button here. Something that we don't know if we have it. So let me just, if I reload everything, just to avoid this error for something empty. If we are going to our contacts API, let's go move to our contacts. Remember that we need a method to fetch the comments. Right now we just have fetch post. So what we need to do is go, we have the performance, get comments, but we need to include it into a provider. So let's import it. We're gonna call then remember this is a method, and this method, let me just clean this up a little bit. We're gonna spread the result to spread all the actions. We're gonna pass the dispatch. And now you can see we get comments. So we gonna be able to move to our comment components and also get this method as well and put it into this button. We're gonna call these actions get comments after we click. So let's see what happens. So if we click, nothing happened. Nothing happens because in our app provider, we are dispatching an actions, but this action is not matching with anything in this child reducer. So we need to pass child reducer and we need to pass comment reducer. But how can we do this? So right now we have go back to child components, open reducer. This is the reducer, but now anything is matching. That's why we don't have anything. But we need to combine this specific reducer with my comment reducer. So we have two reducers in place. So let's see. For that, we need to use the same concept that Redux is using. We're going to create a new file, and inside is RC. We're gonna call utilities. Inside utilities, we're gonna create a combine reducer. Combine reducer, yes. What we're gonna do now is we are going to try to combine both reducer. We're gonna receive something like this object. So in our store, this is gonna be our store, And this store, for each reducer, we're gonna have a key of the object, and inside of the object we have here like get, like we have right now. Right now it's looking like this. Everything is combined at the same, but for example, we in child we are using all those methods. Sorry, we are using on change. So this is the structure that we need to do in terms to combine reducers. So each reducer is just going to affect the key that we are dispatching some actions. For example, if we're going to dispatch successfully comments, when we're going to change the state, instead to modify the whole state, we're just going to modify everything inside of this particular object. So this is just a theory, but now after you know, we're going to create some new method that is going to be able to combine multiple switch statements. Let's just create a new com. This particular functions is going to receive multiple reducer. How is going to receive it? We're going to call something like, so this is that we are going to receive this object in this particular method. So the next thing that we need to do is we're going to get the key of each property in this object. So we're going to get this key and this key. So reducer keys equaled object keys and reducers. Perfect. We have the key, and now we're gonna return. When we combine reducer, we're gonna just return a new functions that we're gonna be able to catch those state and actions. Let me try to be more clear. Like return, we're gonna use the method that we already have, combine reducer. But when we combine the reducer, they just going for each one, there's just going to return a new, they're gonna return this enclosure. So what we're gonna do inside the enclosure is let next state, we're gonna get this state that we're getting from the returning of this combination. Then we're gonna loop for each one. Let, so for each reducer, we're gonna get the state of each one. So this is the state that is coming from the current state of our application. Then we're gonna get we're gonna have a copy of that state, and this is the state that we're gonna return. We're gonna change it out if some cases are matching with our actions that we're dispatching. So let's loop inside. We're gonna get the key for reducer keys. We're gonna get first one, reducer equals is gonna, so what it does now is it's getting one key. For example, it's getting child reducer. Then inside all those reducers that we have, we are getting that particular reducer, and then previous state for key is equal to state. We're gonna add, remember that we have this object, this is the store that we have. This key should be the same as this one. For example, this reducer, but we're gonna simplify like this, common and child. So that's why we need to do something like this. Child is gonna be this one, common is gonna be this one. So we're gonna get the key of that, of this particular state, previous state is going to be the state with this key. For example, if we are in the position 0, 0 is going to be a child, and the reducer is going to get the child reducer and also is going to get the child state, only this blocked. After that, we're going to next, or declare next state for key, and this should be the reducer. And remember, each one we're gonna get this this particular reducer. We are getting this reducer, child reducer, and now because each reducer needs a state and needs an actions, we need to pass down the state, previous state for key, and the actions that we are having. This action coming from out there. This action is going to be the same for all of them. The next thing, finally, we will have some result if one of these reducer match with our actions. And we're going to go to update this next state that we have previously here. Is going to be equal to, we're going to express next state. It's going to be the same one, next state, but we're going to modify the key that it's matching with the next state key. And finally, when everything gets done, we need to return after iterate in these objects. We're gonna return. Perfect. Let me just get rid of this. Let's try to use it, how to see if that works. I'm going to combineReducer. Let me just export as default. This is the same concept that Redux use, perhaps with more nice stuff, but at the end it's the same concept. So we're gonna import in our main app provider combineReducer from, and we are going to, instead to pass one, let's just declare something, const root reducer equal combineReducer, and then we're gonna pass an object called child reducer, and the other one, what is it? Reducer, this one. Oh no, need to import. Common reducer from components child containers reducer. Oops, child now. Comment reducer and comment point comments. So what I said before, we need to override, we need to make a better structure of this, like child object curly brackets, and we're gonna move this one inside here. And for comments, because we're gonna have perhaps actions and everything, we will have something like comments, a new object. We can call, I don't know, maybe data comments. And remember that we're gonna have get comments, but the get comments, it will come from the performance object. So we also need to, let me change root reducer, so the combination is gonna be in useReducer. And here we need to do the same thing. Child, object, and let's spread what child has, and spread the method. And comments, spread all the method of state comments, and also all the method for comments. Let's see how it works. We have an error here. Yeah, okay. It's because remember that we changed, now it's comment data instead comment map. So we need to go to comment components. It should be comment data dot map. Let's first of all, we're going to comment this out. Let's see. I want to see first how the object looks like in my provider. Oh, also, it's not about this one also. It's because in child components, we also have another map. And now it's child. And now here we go. Remember the structure change. It's different. Let me see how my contacts looks. Open the virtual DOM tree. Open the value. We have a child, and child we have the method, and comment we have the method. Also, here we won't be able to access directly, so we're gonna need a little bit of reformat of refactoring, and to be able to, let me see if I can performance. I have a console error. Get pass, it's not a function. This is for the method of the input, but this one shall need to be. So this guy, it looks fine right now. Let's move to React. Let me see how it looks. Everything perfect. And now I want to see the comments. What happened with the comments? When I dispatch an action for the comments one, data, it's empty. Interesting. So now we need to see what is happening here. Remember the actions right now, it's to get the comments, we have to get inside the comment object and then get comments. So perhaps we just need to change the button here. So all those things are inside all comments. The provider, we have a comments. Oh, I have a mistake here in app provider. This key should be the same. That's why we need to refactor this one, this key, for example. We can inside the comments to avoid this. Better to go to combineReducers. Let's export the key name. Let me export key equal. So then we're going to be able to import this key in our app provider. Go to app provider, again comments reducer, the structure, the key as comment key. Let's just use the same key for this guy, same key for that one, and same key for this one. Let's use the same key for the state. And combineReducer, the skin, combineReducer. Perfect. Let's move on to our components. We have comment and data. I'm gonna comment this out first to see how the object looks like. Let's see the provider comments, and we have a data object, data array, and get comments. So data array, we should be able to access to this array normally. Oh, it's because we have a data here. We already have inside the comments. We already are inside the comments. So perfect. And then we're gonna fetch, gonna perform the event. And so you can see comments was perfectly getted. This is the first mistake that we did, and inside our reducer in comments. So if we can go to comments, reducer, remember that we add this key. So what we need to do, it's simple, just get the data here. And now when we dispatch the actions, data is going to fill and it's going to populate everything. Perfect. combineReducer, it's already implemented. Our application is looking better, more cleaner. So we can do more. We can also clean this up, extracting all this code from the app provider in a single file. And yeah, we're using the same concept of Redux, but only using hooks and context API for React. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.